New this morning, federal prosecutors are asking for help as Donald Trump increases his attacks on the justice system. The special counsel's office now asking the judge in the classified documents case to block Trump from making statements that could endanger law enforcement investigating and prosecuting in that case. The request comes after Trump falsely claimed the Biden administration, quote, authorized the FBI to use deadly force against him during the 2022 Mar-a-Lago raid. Of course, that is not true. The Justice Department followed standard FBI policy. Just one escalation this week of Trump's outrageous campaign rhetoric. In another example, a video posted on his social media feed echoed the language of Nazi Germany. The post was later deleted, and the campaign blamed it, as they so often do, on an unnamed staffer. Joining us now, MSNBC political contributor and White House correspondent for Politico, Eugene Daniels, and Minnie Tamaraju, president of Reproductive Freedom for All. Friends, good morning.
Good morning.
It's really concerning. Very, 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 very concerning. Was anybody else concerned this week?
All y'all just need this fascism every day. and the thing is, it is getting to the point where it just feels, oh, well, okay, no big deal. And I think that's, for me, a very concerning thing. When you take that attitude and you layer it into other things that we're going to be talking about over the next couple of hours, from abortion to elections to all these other things that impact people's lives every day, what is systematically happening is a numbing to it. Mm-hmm. And that numbing is a way of when the thing hits, everyone goes, well, why is everybody so upset? I don't get it. I don't understand. I don't know how you guys look at it. I mean, I know in the work you're doing right now, and certainly what you're doing, Eugene, in covering these stories, what are you picking up? What are you seeing and hearing out here from people when they see a presidential candidate out there saying and doing the things Trump is doing in this space, in this sort of fascist space?
That's just how Trump is often what you hear from even just regular voters, right? That's just Trump. That's how he talks. He's not serious. Those are the way. And some Democrats think that same way, too. Like, we've heard this from him before. And so that numbing you're talking about hasn't just been going on right now. It's been going on since 2015 when he came down the escalator and changed the way that people perceive how politicians should be speaking, the kinds of things they should be saying, what's appropriate, what's not, moving the Overton window so far that when you talk to everyday voters, some lawmakers, they say, well, he's not going to actually do the things that he says he's going to do, right? Even though we have proof that in his 4 years, it's not like this is, 2015, right? A lot of voters said, I don't actually know what he's going to do, but now they do know what he's going to do. And there's been proof from, Project 25 and all of these other spaces that say, no, this is what Donald Trump wants to do. He wants
So is that what the race should be about? I mean,
that's what Biden's trying to make it about, right?
I think it has to be about both of the things, right? Like, it is about, Minnie, I feel like you're out there on the campaign trail just as much as the reporters covering the president and the candidates themselves, okay?
A little mini candidate.
A little mini candidate out here. Minnie's like, no, please. My staff is like, I have a job.
Absolutely not.
Folks out there, when you talk to people across the country, like, literally, as I like to say, regular folks that are living their lives and they're going to participate in this election, you hear about the, Trump, but you also hear about what they're dealing with in their families, the grocery store, they're worried about their health care, their kids, housing, right? And so it's a both and. It's not an either or, I think.
And to your points, it is by design, this shock and awe. We're going to do so much crazy stuff that people will not be able to parse it out. Oh, that's just Donald Trump being crazy. The good news is, in all of this, is voters are paying attention to some of the core issues. And abortion is one of the most persuasive ones. So we have Trump on tape, in his own words, talking about bragging about overturning Roe, punishing women and providers. That's the most effective message, and it's why Biden's ads are hammering it over and over again, and why his surrogates are hammering it over and over again. But we also can say to voters very clearly, this is what a Trump administration did. So it helps address the believability gap about what Trump can do. And we have a chance to really explain what Democrats can and will do. So it's great that Senate Democrats are going to have votes on right to contraception and IVF. You're going to see a lot of the Biden administration folks out in the next month talking about abortion, birth control, reproductive freedom.
So the former president has given us the framing for the America he wants to create, an American Reich. What was stunning to me about that was how it landed.
With a thud?
Yeah. Okay, so it wasn't just me.
I don't think folks know what Reich is.
Yeah.
I think that.
Come on.
No, but I just
cannot be. I'm not even going to buy this idea that at this point in our history, when you hear the word Reich, you have no idea what it refers to.
I want to interject and play some sound from the president and from the second gentleman, where they, I think, respond to this in part to address the need for a shakeup here. Take a listen.
What's next for America?
Is this on his official account? Wow. A unified Reich? That's Hitler's language. That's not America's. He cares about holding on to power. I care about you.
If Jewish people are going to vote for Joe Biden, they have to have their head examined.
The last person I'm going to take advice from as a Jewish person is a known anti-Semite who's had dinner with anti-Semites, who said there was good people on both sides after Charlottesville. He's the last person I'm going to take advice from.
I think that speaks to your point, though, right? That there's the recognition of a necessity to take people by the shoulders and say, this is not normal.
Out of it. Yeah, it's not normal. And it's one of those things that I just find frustrating. The Trump campaign's excuse was this was not a campaign video. It was created by a random account online and reposted by a staff who clearly did not see the word while the president was in court. There is so many levels of BS in that statement. And they push it out there. And there is no countermeasure to it. I mean, outside of what we just saw from the president and the second gentleman, there is this sense I get in the communities out there that it just does a thud. It just doesn't land the way I think when I heard it, I literally was stopped. I had to go back and I pulled it up and looked at it in the fine print of it just to make sure that it wasn't being misreported because it was so jarring. And yet...
But I think the point that you made, Simone, about not everybody understanding the reference is actually why it was so smart for the president to do that video and say, those are Hitler's words. We have to keep spelling out for voters. We assume voters are smart. It's not that they're not smart. It's that they're not paying close attention to every little gotcha moment, right? And Trump is counting on it.
Right.
He's counting on us not paying attention, right?
Yeah.
So the campaign's being really smart.
He's counting on us not paying attention, but he's also counting on the fact that he is selling his supporters an alternative narrative of what is happening. So you take, for example, his claim about use of deadly force at the Mar-a-Lago incident and
search and seizure,
and not acting as though that is standard protocol. Here is Merrick Garland responding to that claim.
That allegation is false, and it is extremely dangerous. The document that is being referred to in the allegation is the Justice Department's standard policy limiting the use of force. As the FBI advises, it is part of the standard operations plan for searches, and in fact, it was even used in the consensual search of President Biden's home.
The concern, of course, is that the fact check never gets to the people who've already bought the lie.
It's too late, largely. Like, we've seen this over and over and over again, right? That Republicans find something, and then once it gets into the bloodstream of the conspiracy theorists, the great things about conspiracy theories is they don't have to be true. And any fact that you try to interject with, they say, well, you're part of the deep state. You're part of the problem, right? So it doesn't actually matter. Once it gets into the bloodstream, and you watch how it happens. Marjorie Taylor Greene says that she wouldn't call Trump to make sure that he knew that that they were ready to kill him. He wasn't there, first of all. These are things that always happen. So a larger problem is that you have a lot of folks who are in government, and think about Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boeberts, who don't understand how government works and don't understand like standard operating procedure. You don't change that. It is standard no matter who the person is that you're searching and seizing. And so when they see that in their head, they say, oh, this was something new. which is not true at all. And so sometimes it's insidious, sometimes it's complete ignorance. And I will say you have the Biden folks who are worried that they're not going to be able to shake enough people's shoulders, right? That they're saying, no, pay attention to this. And so they're trying TikTok, they're trying all of the different ways, but there's so much spaghetti that gets thrown on the wall. And so many people believe that the Trump campaign, the Trump administration, the Trump campaign before that were so unorganized and unprofessional that, like, oh, of course something like this accidental Third Reich reference ended up in this video. They don't know what they're doing, right? That is also a part of it, and that's a part of how sometimes we in the media can fall into, right? We know how these campaigns usually work and how the Trump campaign doesn't typically work like that. And so we have to be careful in our own coverage of being like, even if it was an accident, if they say it's an accident, we have to let the American people know, no, this is what it said, accident or not.
Yeah, and we don't know if it was an accident because Donald Trump himself has been posting on his social media site from court, and I find it very laughable that they tried to blame it on a young woman staffer for him. I know we have to go to the next thing, but the Politico, I think, put the finest point on this about fascism. Regardless of how or why the video made its way onto Trump's social media feed, the incident highlights a broader problem for the GOP. Right-leaning corners of the internet are absolutely inundated, inundated with fascist or fascist-adjacent content, and that content is increasingly making its way into more mainstream conservative discourse. Let's talk a little more on the old playbook that Donald Trump is relying on to divide voters. At Donald Trump's Thursday rally in the Bronx, he falsely accused immigrants of taking jobs away from Black and Latino voters. Now, that is not true. The unemployment rate is near record lows for all Americans, but in Donald Trump's world, voter outreach is all about misleading. It's all about dividing. Instead of offering solutions, he's just pointing out fake problems. And as the Associated Press reports, quote, Trump's campaign believes he can chip away at Biden's support among Black and Hispanic voters, particularly younger men who may not follow politics closely but are frustrated by their economic situations and drawn to Trump's tough guy persona. Back with us is Leah Daughtry and Tara Setmeyer. I just want to know if you'd like to have a comment.
Well, if I roll my eyes any harder, they'll get stuck at the top of my head. But first of all, I want to know who are these Bronx people, because it's not clear to me they're even from the Bronx. And so the picture is just tainted. I'm a New Yorker, and so I just view the whole thing with skepticism. But I think this is where the pivot has to happen with the Biden campaign, because people are running around with fake facts and, espousing all of this ridiculousness, which has no basis in truth. And that's where ads don't work, radio or TV. This is a ground game, voter to voter, person to person, neighborhood to neighborhood, where you can refute these things and talk as people who live next door to each other about what this is going to mean for our children, our neighborhoods, our people. That's the only way you combat this. People aren't listening to the fact that the unemployment is low, or that health care is available, or that contraception may be taken away. What they're concerned about is about gas prices, which are the lowest, or about food prices, which is on the lowering, which about recession, which there is no recession. So they need their neighbors, their friends, and they've got to have a ground game that addresses these things person to person, neighbor to neighbor, house to house, door to door.
So to that point, Tara, to Leah's point, what does that look like, given all the external activity that a campaign has traditionally done in the past, and we've talked about some of that. Is something different required now if you know you're up against an asymmetrical player like Trump, so you don't know at any given issue or day of the week where he's going to come from? He could land with something stupid, like saying, African Americans are getting slaughtered. What's the counter narrative that, not just Democrats, but the rest of America needs to
everybody who's not racist, Terry.
Right. Well, I think Simone kind of put it down, Lenford. There you go. So let's go with that. Because I'll put that in my coffee. Let's go with that.
Yes. Well, herein lies the challenge. You are correct when you say we're dealing with an asymmetrical political warfare candidate here. And I think this is the challenge for Democrats. that they haven't fully recognized that you got to change some of the traditional ways in which you do things and be a little bit more aggressive in how you do them. And to Leah's point, you have to meet people where they are. So that means that the traditional way of political campaigning, whether it's ads and things like that, do those things, but you have to have another robust ground game where you are talking to people, meeting them where they are in all kinds of different ways. Because the way people communicate today, the way that people associate with each other today is a little bit different than it used to be. It's not the Rotary clubs anymore, but you find those ways and you find those surrogates who have credibility in the community, and you make sure that they're armed with the facts and the ability to speak to their folks, speak to them, have a conversation. You have to be present. And so I think that makes a huge difference. And the Trump administration, the Trump campaign, they are seeing that there is an opening here. So they're taking advantage of that. But the way in which they're doing it, I think, is so outrageous. I mean, Donald Trump, it's so insulting. To Leah, I'm from Jersey, so I get Leah's point, too. I was looking at that crowd going, these people are not from the Bronx. Like, okay, maybe some, but most of them are from somewhere else. But they make it's perception. Perception is the reality in politics. And it's like you have these people. Donald Trump is embracing what the tropes are about who black people are or who Hispanics are listening to. I mean, he had accused murderer rappers up there on the stage and embraced them and was like, yeah, these guys are great because they endorse me. But then he goes and he talks about the crime in the community. Well, you just had two guys who are accused of major gang violence in Brooklyn on stage with you. Like, who's pointing this out? We need people in the communities to be like, that's the exact opposite. But that's who Donald Trump thinks attracts people of color. It's all of the racial stereotypes, the sneakers, just all of it. It's just so antiquated and stereotypical and insulting. But meanwhile, you have a president who has appointed the first black female Supreme Court justice, who has a diverse cabinet, who has a record-breaking investment in black businesses and in healthcare in the communities, and no one knows this. So get your surrogates out there on the ground in the community, explaining it to people and telling them this is what we will continue to do, not the guy who goes after people of color who are election workers who claim that all the election fraud happened to be in black cities. And this is the guy that thinks that's going to be good for us. He's looking out for us. I don't think so.
And one last thing I would say is, he didn't just go to the Bronx because he felt like going to the Bronx. He's in the Bronx because his court case is constraining his movements. And so he is in New York, and he went to the Bronx because it's close to the courthouse. So let's remember that this is not, I think I'll just go see the black and brown people this weekend. Right. This is as far as he could go and still get to court on Tuesday.
And he also thinks that being a criminal defendant is going to help him with the black community because, y'all are criminals. You get it, just like me. I'm a victim. Like
y'all crime a lot, so y'all understand what's going on.
It's so ridiculous. But this is what he telling us what he believes,
That's
y'all.
Right.
He's telling us, act accordingly.
Listen to him.
Welcome back to The Weekend, everyone. We are about to face a very historic moment. A former American president could soon be a convicted criminal. This coming Tuesday, arguments are expected to begin in Donald Trump's 2016 election interference trial. There's been weeks of testimony from former members of Trump's inner circle, including people like Michael Cohen, who faced a grueling cross-examination. But Cohen's former attorney, Lanny Davis, well, he says the real smoking gun in this case isn't from any witnesses. It's actually a document that outlined how the hush money payments were made to Stormy Daniels. And Lanny Davis joins us now. He's the former legal advisor to Michael Cohen and former special counsel to President Bill Clinton. Lanny, good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning.
Tell the people about the document. Let's talk about this document because if folks have not been following the case and everything that has been happening in court, they might be hard-pressed to believe that the crime was written down.
Well, it's a document that's in handwriting and has been admitted into evidence from Alan Weisselberg, the closest person to Donald Trump in the entire Trump organization, who controlled the money. Therefore, Trump was very close to him. He wrote a document out about repaying Michael Cohen for the money that he paid to Stormy Daniels, which was politically motivated according to Donald Trump's own friends and witnesses, such as David Pecker, which makes it a crime if it was politically motivated to pay hush money. This document shows how the calculation was made to repay Michael Cohen. And in Weisselberg's handwriting, he took $420,000, divided it by 12, and that equaled $35,000, which is the check that he wrote each month to Michael Cohen in 2017 as a sitting president. There's no reference to legal fees. As James Carville would say, it's about the math, stupid. 420 divided by 12 equals $35,000 a month to repay Michael Cohen for what he went to jail for, which is the crime of paying somebody to be quiet for political reasons right before an election. He went to jail for that, and Donald Trump directed him to do that.
So Lenny, let's say that there is a juror who brings this piece of evidence, right, this Weisselberg document, and says, here it is, as you describe it, here is, the smoking gun, and then you have another juror who says, but we don't have direct evidence of Donald Trump's participation in the falsification of those records. What do you then, as the juror who has presented the Weisselberg document, say in response?
Well, there are really two responses. Juries use common sense. This is a document written in handwriting, divides by 12. It's all about math. There's no reference to legal fees. So why would Donald Trump lie and call them legal fees when it's apparent from the document from Weisselberg that it's division by 12, $35,000 a month? As a sitting president, Donald Trump wrote checks to Michael Cohen for $35,000. So a jury will have to say, where is any reference to legal fees? When Donald Trump himself posted a tweet that said reimbursements, that's also part of the evidence. So a common sense juror decision would be they don't have to depend on Michael Cohen. That was my piece in Real Clear Politics. They can look at that document and say there's no reference to legal fees. He lied about legal fees. This is a reimbursement according to his own chief financial officer, and they can conclude beyond a reasonable doubt that this had nothing to do with legal fees. Therefore, the judge will instruct them that if it was a reimbursement for a crime, then he can be found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt without depending on Michael Cohen's testimony.
Laney, it's good to see you again. It's been a long time, friend. I wanted to get your assessment, having been in the courtroom, having counseled Michael Cohen. What was your vibe with the jury? You're familiar with this space, and how do you think his testimony, what Alicia just raised as a potential, obstacle, if you will, for making the case. How do you think the jury's reading this trial and taking in the information as presented? Is it too complicated? Is it pretty straightforward? What's your assessment of what they're hearing and seeing?
Well, first, I wasn't in the courtroom because I was fearful that I would be pointed out and called up to testify, and it turned out they did mention my name, so it was a good decision. Look, this is very simple for a jury to figure out. Everybody who was Trump's witnesses, David Pecker, Hopick, said this, of course, was about campaign related, and that makes it a crime. And the federal prosecutors working for Donald Trump described this as a serious crime because when you pay for silence, prevent voters from hearing information right before an election, that's a serious crime according to Donald Trump's federal prosecutors who sent Michael Cohen to prison. So here's the vibe, Michael. It's very simple. The Trump, as usual, tried to change the subject and make Michael Cohen the accused. What I wrote is you don't need to believe Michael Cohen. The flat-out evidence is his own witnesses said, of course, it was politically motivated. Answer, that's a crime. Second, did he lie about legal fees? Of course he lied about legal fees. There was no reference to legal fees. It was math by Weisselberg dividing 420 by 12, $35,000 a month, where the checks a sitting president wrote. Ergo, two crimes. That makes, I think, a verdict without relying on Michael Cohen.
Laney, in the lead up to this trial beginning, and even while it was going on, Donald Trump said that he would take the stand. He would testify. He said this before in other cases. He did not take the stand in this case. I want to play for you what Donald Trump told WABC Radio about why he decided not to testify.
Because he made rulings that makes it very difficult to testify. Anything I did in the past, they can bring everything up. And you know what? I've had a great past, but anything. But the other thing is, and the main reason, and I don't even mind that. In fact, I like talking about it because we had rigged cases. The other reason is because they have no case. In other words, why testify when they have no case?
I don't know, Lanny. How did you? I mean, we're sitting here as the sound was playing, and it's like Donald Trump saying, "I've had a great past, but all these things I did in the past, crimes maybe." Did he? What is happening here? I don't understand.
Let me talk to all the Trump voters that always watch your program. Do you believe? I know you love Mr. Trump. Do you believe when he said, I would testify, if he's got a story to tell, why would any of that make sense? Why wouldn't Donald Trump just get up there and stand up the way Michael Cohen did and tell the truth? Do you think it's because his lawyers say, no, we don't trust you to tell the truth? Trump supporters know that Donald Trump promised he would testify and then chickened out. Even they know that. So what he just said makes no sense. I know that's surprising that Donald Trump makes no sense. But it's clearly he was afraid to testify, didn't have the fortitude that Michael Cohen did.
Lenny, if you were watching this jury, then part of what you're going to be watching for in this coming week is sort of any clarifying questions that they ask for, right? It will be our first insight into where there are potential sticky points in their conversations. What are you going to be watching for? What will those questions, should they emerge, indicate to you?
The jury instruction about what is evidence is key. A lot of people think you have to have, as a question was just asked me, direct evidence that Donald Trump paid reimbursements illegally rather than legal fees. But when you look at the document by Alan Weisselberg, it's obvious it had nothing to do with legal fees. So what does the word obvious mean? There's something called circumstantial evidence that the judge will instruct the jury. And here's what I always say for my favorite movie, All the President's Men. If this jury fell asleep at night and there was no snow on the ground and woke up in the morning and saw snow on the ground, that jury could conclude beyond a reasonable doubt that it snowed overnight. That's what they will look at with a document that speaks for itself. Believe your lying eyes. That's the hot document that proves the second crime, which is falsifying, because Donald Trump lied when he said it was legal fees to pay Michael Cohen $35,000 a month for 12 months, when in fact all it was a division of the money that Michael Cohen had advanced and he was repaying. Repayment means it's a crime.
Lenny, how does...
Believe your lying eyes is what the judge will say.
Right. Right. How does other testimony reinforce some central narratives around Trump? For example, you had Hope Hicks echoing Pecker about Donald Trump being the micromanager. In other words, if the defense is trying to separate Donald Trump out of this, as if, well, I didn't know what was going on, I had no idea this was happening around me. You have testimony that says, well, that can't be right because you are known as a micromanager. You're known as someone, as it says, quote, gets very involved in the media strategy for the campaign. He knew what he wanted to say, how he wanted to say it. That translates into how Donald Trump also runs his business and how he manages his affairs. How does that fit into sort of rebuffing this narrative of Donald Trump somehow being a victim of Michael Cohen's bad behavior?
The quick answer is believe in the jury system. Most jurors, almost all jurors, are very conscientious. They're respectful of the law. They use their common sense. If a micromanager who's chintzy, who wants to pay 20 cents on the dollar when he owes $1, if that is the testimony that surrounds Donald Trump in the trial, and the jury says, is it conceivable? Is there any reasonable doubt that he would have paid $35,000 a month in personal checks from his personal checking account as a sitting president? Would he do that if he didn't have to avoid the disclosure of this illegal act because he knows Michael Cohen went to jail for federal prosecutors working for him for the same crime. So, of course, they will logically say he's not going to write $35,000 equaling $420,000 without having a reason. And Alan Weisselberg said to him in writing, in script, 420 divided by 12, pay Michael Cohen this, no reference to legal fees. Jurors have common sense, and I trust the jury system.
All right, Lanny Davis, really appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.
Could I take 30 seconds, Michael?
Sure, go ahead.
Michael, could I give a 30-second ending? So Michael Cohen was giving a commencement speech, and I was in the audience, and he said to all the students, and his nephew was in the audience, I want to congratulate you on your graduation. My speech is over, and he sat down. And the kids stood up and gave him a standing ovation. Then he came back and said, I'm only kidding. That's a Michael Steele moment that everyone should know about. Thank you, Mike.
You appreciate it. I appreciate it, Lenny. Thank you so much, my friend.
Donald Trump hopes to win over libertarian voters in his quest to win back the White House. But that might be easier said than done.
We must work together. Combine with us. You have to combine with us. We cannot give crooked Joe Biden 4 more years. The Libertarian Party should nominate Trump for President of the United States. Whoa. That's nice. That's nice. Only if you want to win. Only if you want to win. Maybe you don't want to win. Maybe you don't want to win.
Become ungovernable indeed. Your ears do not deceive you. That was the ex-president being met with boos at last night's Libertarian National Convention here in D.C. Worth noting, in several battleground states in 2020, the Libertarian candidate won more votes than the margin of victory between President Biden and Trump. Now, of course, these efforts are secondary to Trump's main electoral strategy, deny the results of the 2024 election if he does not win. Joining us now, former Illinois Congressman and 2020 Republican presidential candidate Joe Walsh and Ruth Ben-Ghiat, professor of history at NYU. She is the author of Strongmen, Mussolini to the Present.
So Joe, that went well. that was a good night out. Look, why did Trump go there? What was the point there? Because my sense was, and we were kind of talking and laughing a little bit during the break, there was a little bit of trolling going on here. He liked that money. One part of his brain was really put off by the booing because everyone should love him because I'm Donald Trump and everyone should love me. But the other side of his brain was like, okay, this is good. This is good. This is good for the brand. This is good to remind my voters, my supporters, that everybody's after me. The little man problem that he has. What's your take?
He went there to troll, and not to get into libertarian inside baseball politics, but the Libertarian Party has kind of been overtaken by a MAGA wing. Mm-hmm. So I think Trump thinks he can get the Libertarian vote this year. But, Michael, I think this is, why did he go to the Bronx last week? Right. Why is he going everywhere? I think he's trying to contrast himself with Joe Biden, that he's going to get in front of any crowd. It's all perception. He said there were 20 to 30,000 people in the Bronx last week. There wasn't. Right. But he's giving this appearance like he'll go anywhere to get any vote.
Yeah. Even desperate. Ruth, I mean, that's how it sounds to me. Ruth, I too was wondering, I'm like, what is Donald Trump doing at the Libertarian Party convention or conference, especially because Vivek Ramaswamy was there earlier this week when he mentioned Donald Trump's name. There were boos then. There is understanding this now in the reporting. The Libertarian Party invited both Donald Trump and President Biden. President Biden declined. And he got a couple cheers while he was there. He got some boos. But this moment I was definitely struck by. He again talked about the January 6th protesters, not calling them protesters, though, and promised a pardon yet again. We want to play this sound for you, and I want your reaction on the other side.
It will be my great honor to pardon the peaceful January 6th protesters, or, as I often call them, the hostages. They're hostages. There has never been a group of people treated so harshly or unfairly in our country's history. This abuse will be rectified, and it will be rectified very quickly. And if you vote for me on day one, I will commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht
So, Ruth, that last point, the person's name that Donald Trump shouted out, many libertarians have called for that sentence to be commuted for that person. Ross Ulbricht was sentenced to life in federal prison for creating and operating a hidden website known as the Silk Road. And that website people use to buy and sell drugs, among other illegal goods and services. What's your reaction to all of this?
Yeah, so the reason he is mentioning, pardoning the lawless is that that part of his message is going to land well with libertarians who really believe that, in a very small government that should leave people free to plunder the workforce, to make money any way they see fit, and not be bound by any regulations. And there's a part of authoritarianism which is, more controls on the many, right, on the masses, as we used to say in history, but fewer controls on the elite so that they can exploit and abuse and do anything they want to do. So that's part of the libertarian appeal for some of these people. But the booing was so interesting because, to talk about what you were speaking with Joe, this is a guy who's been confined in the courtroom, and he feels that he has to be everywhere, and he needs those cheers for his ego all the more. So the booing was, perhaps he knew he would get some of that, but the booing is also a kind of lethal blow to the kind of ego that the strongman has, because the secret of the strongman is that they're very weak and they're very brittle. And so right now, I think he's going everywhere also because he's desperate for attention and for that is not him falling asleep in the courtroom.
It brings me, Michael, to what you were flagging for us, the piece from Rolling Stone about the fact that you now have two sources telling Rolling Stone that the president has been actively lobbying Republicans to pass legislation that would keep him out of jail forever, essentially. Yeah. He wants a blank check. So this idea of being ungovernable, it's not just for libertarians, it's for him.
It's for him, and it's a part of the narrative, Joe, that you see playing out. Donald Trump wants to place himself above the law because he wants to crime as much as he wants to crime, right? And he doesn't want to be held accountable for that. And he wants to do things and use government in a way to execute against his enemies, execute against those who would stand in the way of his idea of what America is, his Reich that he wants to create. You have a national polling out here that says when it comes to the November 2024 election, this is a Bloomberg Morning Consult poll, how much do you trust the election and its aftermath will be free from violence? 51% say a lot. Some, 49% said not so much, not at all. That's where we are, Joe. We have these two things that are happening at the same time that in my view are coming to a point of convergence. You have Donald Trump out here just kind of, priming the pump, I'm above the law, write the laws in my favor, put me in power so I can deconstruct the administrative state, blow it all up. And then people's confidence in this system wavering to the point where they think there will be violence. How are you seeing this convergence?
He's utterly un-American, and this Memorial Day weekend, he's the antithesis of who we remember this weekend. But Michael, here's the danger. Trump is an un-American, lawless psychopath, but this race is close. In 2020, Donald Trump started saying months before the election, either I win or it'll be stolen. Right. He did that to incite violence. He wanted January 6th. Here's the scary thing, though. It's not just, as you know, Michael, it's not just Trump this year. How many Republicans have, when asked that question, will you accept the results of an election? How many have said, of course? They're all echoing Trump now. I actually think the threat of violence is greater because now it's not just Trump. It's Ted Cruz, it's Marco Rubio, it's all of them who will not give a straight answer to that question.
It is. It's so concerning because I think about the election workers, right, and the folks who we need election workers. Most of them are, frankly, volunteers all across this country, seeing older Americans who volunteer their time to work the polls to make sure the ballots get counted. And those were some of the key folks that were targeted the last time. I think about Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. Think about what happened in Michigan. Michigan was literally, Michigan was foreshadowing for what happened on January 6th. In Michigan, they took up arms against the government at the state capitol, against the governor. In Michigan, vigilantes, as I would like to call them, again, intimidated. Folks tried to overrun a polling place. Ruth, how can the American people guard themselves against this? What the secretaries of states have been, and I mean, we've had a number of them on this show talking about what they are doing, but what do the American people need to know in advance of what is going to be a consequential but frankly scary time this fall?
I think that we need to be much stronger in messaging that the Republican Party is doing all this because they actually fear the power of the Democratic vote. If they didn't fear it so much, they wouldn't have invested so much in trying to make Americans believe and lose all faith in the election system. And Trump and his enablers have, invested hugely in this actually since 2016. But they also are, attacking the whole apparatus of elections, and that's what autocrats do. So they combine a kind of propaganda trying to make people believe that elections are either not safe, they're rigged, they don't matter, with a kind of assault through threat. This is what happens, in Hungary and Turkey, and you get these people to feel threatened. They have lawsuits, and so you get them to clean the election apparatus themselves, and then you put in extremists. And they're already talking. Lara Trump had said that they're going to, have the RNC will have there'll be election monitors, and some of those can be armed. So they're using the whole arsenal of autocracy, threat, lies, violence, which shows how threatened they are that Democrats will get out and vote. So we have to explain more clearly the why of this, the logic of this, and also the importance of voting. There are way too many Americans who didn't vote last time.
Welcome back to The Weekend. The first criminal trial of a former president is nearing an end. On Tuesday, closing arguments will begin in Donald Trump's 2016 election interference trial. After that, jury deliberations will take place. Depending on how long those deliberations last, we could have a verdict by the end of next week. By the end of this week. And Trump seems laser focused on Judge Juan Merchan, who's overseeing the case, unleashing a new attack on him just overnight. But as Politico notes, that could come back to haunt Trump at his sentencing if he were to be convicted. Joining us now, MSNBC legal analyst Christy Greenberg. She is a former federal prosecutor and former deputy chief of the Southern District of New York Criminal Division. And MSNBC legal analyst Glenn Kirshner. He is a former federal prosecutor and host of the Justice Matters podcast. Justice matters indeed.
Justice matters.
Okay. Well, first of all, Chrissy, how about what are we going to expect? Obviously, there's no court tomorrow. It's Memorial Day. Thankful to everyone who has given their life in service of this country. On Tuesday, court will resume. Is my understanding it's called summations in New York, closing arguments. What can we expect? Give us a prediction. And then we want to talk about some of this rhetoric.
So I think on Tuesday, you're going to hear two very different closing arguments. From the prosecution side, you're going to hear about the fact that in 2016, Donald Trump had secrets that he did not want the American people to know, right? That he cheated on his wife with two women. One was a Playboy playmate. Another was a porn star, and that he feared that the American people would learn this truth. And so he told his friend in the tabloid business, and he told his fixer to take care of it for him. He was at the center of all of that. He told them to pay up so these women would shut up. And it worked. And you're going to hear the prosecution point out that this worked. He won. And then he covered it up. And he made sure that the people who worked for him covered up what he had done. On the other side, you're going to hear a closing statement that's very different about a man who had secrets, but that man being Michael Cohen. The fact that he had lied to the IRS, that he had lied to banks, that he lied to Congress, that he had lied to prosecutors, that he said he lied to a judge. And they're going to say now he has lied to you, the jury. They will point out the fact that Donald Trump, the only person whose word, this is at least what the defense, I think, will say, the only person whose word you can take for the fact that Donald Trump approved the payment to Stormy Daniels is Michael Cohen. There's no document that says that. There is no other witness that says that. And there's also no document showing that Donald Trump actually paid for this, that the documents show he paid for legal services, and that's what he thought he was doing. And so I think you are going to hear them really focus on the fact that in order to have a conviction here, you have to focus on and believe the word of a liar, and you should not do that in this case. I think those are the two very different versions of the closings that we are going to see on Tuesday.
So, Glenn, to that point, we had Lanny Davis on our show yesterday, and he talked about the jury instructions being a key part of this, noting the jury instruction about what is evidence is key. A lot of people think you have to have, as a question, what was just asked me, direct evidence that Donald Trump paid reimbursements illegally rather than legal fees. So for him, a big part of this is how the instructions are set up, very much to what Christy was saying. Those arguments are going to be. Once you hear those arguments, the judge is going to say, okay, now this is what y'all need to know, and this is what you need to rule on. How do you see that part of it coming into focus?
Yeah, Michael, legal instructions are the kind of things that lawyers obsess about. Jurors, not so much. One of the most important legal instructions given in every jurisdiction every day around the country is that there is no way to look into the human mind to determine somebody's intent. That's why you get to infer their intent from their conduct, from their words, from who benefits from the commission of these crimes. You know, I've always said, as a prosecutor for 30 years, I never had a defendant or an aspiring defendant announce before or at the time of the crime, listen up, folks, intent, corrupt, criminal. Got it? Now let me go do this thing. Not the way it works. Right. Legal instructions are important, but this is a common sense case, right? Who benefited from these crimes? Donald Trump. In fact, these crimes worked to the detriment of Michael Cohen. He ended up in prison once he was exposed as lying and committing a crime together with Donald Trump. Not to mention, he had to sneak around and take out a home equity line of credit just to make this dirty hush money payment. This is a common sense case. The jury's going to get it. Did Michael Cohen tell a whole bunch of lies in service to Donald Trump and in service to himself? You bet he did. But will the jury understand at the end of the day that Donald Trump was a co-conspirator in all of this? Absolutely.
Christy, let's talk about the defense, which you laid out for us, what you think that they'll do. You had a law school professor weighing in on the possibility that painting everything as a lie could actually back the defense into a corner, writing, if the defense portrays everything as lies, as Trump has claimed, they may paint themselves into a corner. If the jury believes, for example, that Stormy Daniels was telling the truth when she said she had sex with Trump, then Trump's denials may work against his lawyer's defense strategy. Talk about the sort of tightrope they are walking here.
Well, that was a strategic choice that it's unclear why they made. I don't think they had to get into the fact of whether or not Stormy Daniels and Donald Trump had sex. But we know that in the opening statement, the defense made that point that she was a liar. And so now that is an issue. And so I agree that they sort of bit off more than they could chew here. I think they should have kept it focused to the payments. Again, Donald Trump saying, hey, he didn't want to pay. There was some evidence at the trial he actually didn't want to pay her. They should have focused on he didn't want to pay her, and that's why he didn't pay her. And that this is Michael Cohen, again, kind of going rogue and doing his own thing. Do I think that's convincing? No. But that's kind of their best argument here, I think, to try and focus on that and not focus on everything being a lie, because that is a little difficult to, again, not everybody in this case is a liar. You really wanted to focus, if you're the defense, on just one person, Michael Cohen. And it was an odd strategic choice for them to have cross-examined a number of other people like Keith Davidson and Stormy Daniels so hard and try to make them seem like liars as well, when really there was only one person they needed to focus their fire on. But I expect the same in closing. I expect them to, again, be throwing up that everyone in this case essentially is lying. I mean, you have to basically say that David Pecker is a liar, too, because he puts Donald Trump at the center of the Karen McDougal payment. You also have to say that Hope Hicks is a liar when she said that Donald Trump said that the Stormy Daniels payment, it was better coming out in 2018 because it would have been really damaging to the election. You have to say that's a lie. Otherwise, that helps the prosecution's case. And yet the defense didn't really do that. They didn't really take apart the lies, the statements that were hurtful to them, and instead kind of threw up a lot of lies and accusations against people that really didn't hurt them at all in their case. So I think there were just some strategic blunders here. I agree that, they should have focused their fire more on one person, really.
Well, there is someone on the defense's side that has been laser focused with their fire, and it is the defendant, Donald Trump, who has been consistently railing against the judge with some of the most racist overtones and undertones and whatever other tones we can find that I have heard. And he's talked about his other gag orders. This railing against Judge Merchan, I can't imagine that this is going to work out well for Donald Trump if, in fact, the jury convicts him in this case, right? Am I making this up? Anyone?
Glenn?
Yeah.
Glenn's like, you ain't making it up. You're actually not next because it's crazy.
So when it comes, let's say he's convicted, right? And let's say then it falls to Merchan to sentence him. Does the sort of additional behavior factor in?
It's not going to help Donald Trump. I think Judge Merchan will probably divorce all of Donald Trump's ridiculous rhetoric from his sentencing calculation. And I think Judge Merchan has done a remarkable job sort of professionally presiding over this case. The one thing that he said that disappoints me, and it still disappoints me, and it might factor into the sentencing in the event of a conviction, is when he found Donald Trump guilty of 10 counts of criminal contempt of court. Mind you, that violates the conditions of his release in his other 3 criminal cases.
Because he's out on bail. He's on bail.
Stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for that. But when he said, you know what? I don't want to put you in jail because you're the former president and you may very well be the next president. That was Judge Merchan announcing that he will not apply the law equally. And that kind of just was a dagger through my heart. But I do think Judge Merchan may be biding his time. And in the event of a conviction, I absolutely believe he will sentence Donald Trump to a period of incarceration, because without that, this whole endeavor has been for naught, and it will simply encourage tomorrow's aspiring dictator.
Does anybody have $20? I am here to take up a collection plate for that sermon that Glenn just preached about the lack of applying the law equally to Donald Trump because he is a former president. And I'm no lawyer. I'm just a girl that one time had wanted to be a judge, but I can see as clear as day how there are clearly 2 systems of justice.
I can only imagine you on that bench as a judge right now.
The Lord couldn't, which is why I'm at this table.
Midnight tweets to drinking bleach to tear gassing citizens and staging a photo op. We knew Trump was out of control when he was president. Then he lost the 2020 election and snapped, desperately trying to hold on to power. Now he's running again, this time threatening to be a dictator, to terminate the Constitution.
If I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath.
Trump wants revenge, and he'll stop at nothing to get it.
We are a month away from the first presidential debate, and the Biden campaign is ramping up its attacks on Donald Trump. Now, how they plan to do that partly depends on the outcome of Trump's first criminal trial, which could wrap up as early as this week. If Trump is found guilty, NBC News has learned that the Biden campaign is deciding, quote, whether to brand him as a convicted felon. Well, he would be. So joining us now is the co-chair of the Biden-Harris campaign and former senior advisor to the president, Mitch Landrieu. All right, Mr. Mayor. He's also the former mayor of New Orleans, which is why I will always refer to him as Mr. Mayor, because my mama and daddy raised me right. Mr. Mayor, let's start there. Less than a month out from the debate, what is the plan? And if, in fact, Donald Trump is convicted, are you going with the convicted felon Trump label?
Well, Simone and gang, thanks. It's great to see you, and it's great to be back. If I might, with your permission, start off with this. Tomorrow is Memorial Day. It's the day that we as a nation take a moment, step back, and remember all of the men and women that gave their last full measure to preserve our freedom and democracy. I had the honor of standing on the beach at Normandy, where the cemetery is, and of course being in Arlington. It takes me to a place of, number one, being thankful and remembering the sacrifice that people have made to secure our freedom. And then it just makes my blood boil that we have somebody who wants to be president of the United States that called all of those people losers and suckers, because they were fighting to protect our freedom. Freedom, democracy, the fact that we all come to the table of democracy as equals, free and fair elections, the idea that we all abide by the rule of law. And Donald Trump, who is now unhinged and dangerous, and this is what our strategy is going to be, just to tell the people the truth about who he is and remind everybody that when he was in office, as you may recall, during one of the worst pandemics and crises that we've ever had, his solution, his leadership style was to tell everybody to drink bleach. And then when, of course, he didn't win the election, he decided to become delusional and act as though he did. And just to remind everybody, he lost by 8 million votes. And his idea of leadership was, in fact, to incite an insurrection. And when the mob went to the Capitol and for the first time put a Confederate flag in that sacred space and were threatening to kill his vice president, he sat back and literally did nothing. Now, he's also, if you can imagine this, decided to actually be worse and to do more. So when he was given an opportunity by Time Magazine to say, what would you do different? He said, well, I was too nice, I'm going to be meaner. And so our strategy, again, is just to tell the truth about who he was, what he has done, what he is going to do now, which, of course, you all have heard about it because you've talked about it. He's now talking about asking the country to give him immunity to take SEAL Team 6 and assassinate his political opponents. I mean, this is cuckoo land stuff. The President Trump is unhinged, he's dangerous, and we cannot let him get back to the Oval Office.
So, Mr. Mayor, just for the record, he was also the Lieutenant Governor of Louisiana. So from one LG to another, welcome. It's always good to see you, bro.
Thank you.
I want to play up more because I think it's important, and I love the way you started the conversation, noting the importance of this weekend. The Biden campaign has put out the statement referencing the unified Reich that Donald Trump wants to create, noting this Memorial Day weekend, the American dream so many sacrificed for is under threat from Donald Trump, a man who called those who made the ultimate sacrifice suckers and losers, dreams of himself as a dictator who oversees a unified Reich. Can I repeat that for those of you who don't understand what this moment is? Donald Trump himself calls those who served and died for this country that we will remember this weekend, suckers and losers. And he sees this as an opportunity to create a unified Reich. How important, everything else, everyone's talking about the economy and gas prices, all that's important. Then, let's talk about what people are feeling on that front. But you can't lose sight of this truth as well. And how do you create that lane where both of those things are brought together? You see the unification of the country around this idea that Donald Trump is a threat. You worried about gas prices? Well, guess what it will be for a man who wants to impose tariffs. At the same time, wants to be a dictator.
Well, Governor, you make the case, and the reason why we keep repeating it over and over again is because after COVID, some of us have selective amnesia, and we seem to have forgotten. In the world that you and I lived in, you're a Republican, I'm a Democrat, you and I would argue about the best way, for example, to build a road, or the best way to create a tax structure, or maybe the best way for law enforcement to do their work. All of those arguments take place in a frame where both you and I understand that the Constitution, people's rights and responsibilities are all equal, and that if one of us gets out of the way, the system will pull us back into place. Donald Trump is the first president in the history of the United States that wants to burn that system to the ground. He wants to change the whole system. He wants to uproot the tree and all of its roots. He does not believe in democracy, and that is what President Biden is fighting for. That's why he's given 7 speeches on it. So, of course, the president is concerned about the economy, which is why he passed all of the legislation that he passed that has helped create 15 million jobs. Of course, he's concerned about people's cost of groceries, which is why now we've moved inflation from 9% down to 3%, and we continue to go after big pharma, big oil, all these companies who are taking profits when they should not be, making sure that we reduce people's cost on insulin, trying to keep health care. Donald Trump wants to get rid of people's health care. He wants to take people's rights away from them. Now, this is not an exaggeration. He's the one who put 3 people on the Supreme Court for the intent purpose of eviscerating Roe versus Wade. And if that's the first thing they've come after, and now they're getting in state after state after state where they now criminalize abortion, and the Supreme Court the other day took away rights, voting rights, by allowing legislatures to gerrymander and to take away the rights of African-American citizens, what do you think they might come for next? Because that is what Donald Trump wants. And, of course, now you've seen he doesn't think the law applies to him. So we are in real threat in this country, and that is essentially what this election is about. It's about all that other stuff, but you can't have the argument about all that other stuff if your democracy does not exist and freedom is not secured.
Mr. Mayor, Lieutenant Governor, I don't have a third title to give you, but I do want to point out that part of this is, of course, about highlighting Donald Trump's record, and then the other job of the campaign is highlighting what President Biden has done. Let's pull up the full screen of some of these accomplishments, what the campaign is calling the Great American Comeback. Gas prices down, food prices falling, incomes rising across every income level. I don't need to tell you, this conversation we come back to all the time. You have all these accomplishments. Now the job becomes selling those to the American people, making sure that the dots are connected. What does it look like to connect those dots?
Well, first of all, again, this campaign really is just getting kicked off. The president is really excited about the debate, so he can ask Donald Trump why in the world he wanted to eviscerate Roe versus Wade and criminalize abortion and start a war on women. He wants to talk to Donald Trump about his need to want to create political violence and to hurt his political enemies. He wants to talk to Donald Trump about his vision for the future of America, where his idea of creating jobs is to give billionaires tax breaks and balloon the deficit. So that's what he's going to talk about. But he's also going to talk about his accomplishments. And that list that you put there, compared to all the other presidents that have served, that is a fantastic list of accomplishments that has created 15 million jobs, lowest unemployment rate in 50 years, protecting health care, reducing the deficit, and on and on and on. But the president, who understands that people are still hurting, are also fighting to reduce the cost. But his clear message is this: if we do not have a democracy, none of those things will happen in the future, which is why he's putting democracy at the top of the list. And let me say this. People should remember that when Joe Biden took over, we now know that we were in an active insurrection. We now know that we had a pandemic that was the worst in the world. And in all of that, he displayed the kind of leadership of running to problems, finding solutions, putting the American people on the right track. What did Donald Trump do? He sat in the White House and watched people go through our Capitol with a Confederate flag, threatening to kill people, and he did nothing. He did zero. And when people were dying from the pandemic, when leadership during a crisis is needed, he asked people to kind of settle down a little bit, take care of yourselves, and drink a little bit of Clorox, and the world's going to get better for you. Now, those two choices are pretty clear. And I think that there's no question about it. And this is why I feel really confident that Joe Biden's going to win, because I believe in the American people. And I believe when all is said and done, and you're facing Joe Biden and Donald Trump, they're going to pick the future, they're going to pick freedom, and they're going to pick Joe Biden.